I'm going to welcome everyone on behalf of the Emergency Committee for Rojava. And we are here today with a wonderful guest coming from Mexico, and two of us, we are from the Emergency Committee for Rojava. And the title for today was Learning from the Rojava Revolution. I'm going to be moderating. I'm Azizie Aslan. I'm a faculty member at the College of Staten Island and at the Middle Eastern Studies at the Graduate Center at CUNY. And I also am a member of the Emergency Committee for Rojava, as I said. So welcome, everyone. And what I will do is I'll give a brief context because the title is Learning from the Rojava Revolution, but obviously Rojava Revolution wasn't out of the blue. There is a historical background to the Rojava Revolution. And so I'll try to briefly just introduce that topic of the context, the historical context, the political context for this revolution, how it came to be true. I'll do this very briefly because the center of today must be our friend Azizie Aslan, who published a book just in front of you, Anticapitalist Economy in Rojava. So, and she's done field work there, and so she's gonna have more mostly, and I'll introduce also Rebrii, who have done research in Rojava. I'll introduce them in a second after I do this brief context shortly. So Rojava, or as the autonomous administration would say, the revolution in North and East Syria grew to be a project that includes various ethnic and religious components in the regions, and a strong women's self-organizing elements. So to this extent, it doesn't even call itself Rojava anymore. But still, because which is the Kurdish name that refers to that particular Kurdish region, but the revolution grew to be bigger and the desires of freedom for the revolution grew to be larger than an anti-colonial freedom movement for the large Kurdish constituent there. But I want to introduce it because I want to still situate it because we can, I think, fairly say that it would be fair to say that the initial revolution that took place in this past 2 decades is embedded in the Kurdish freedom movement, in the broader Kurdish freedom movement. So I'm going to try to give a context to that Kurdish freedom movement and also a context to a little bit to Kurdistan, to those of you who may not be familiar with this region, and especially because Kurdistan has never been formally recognized as a colony by the colonizers and by the imperialists of England and France who took over that region, but which brought a very ironic dilemma to the solidarity movements, to the progressive movements here in the US, in the West, to then not recognize the anti-colonial struggles that the Kurdish freedom movement started in the region. So it was interesting that there's this weird irony that because the imperial forces didn't even deem it the status of colony, that people were not, it wasn't easy to get progressive circles around or to create solidarity movement for the Kurdish freedom movement. And so I will go back a little bit to say, here's why it's a colony, and here's why the Kurdistan, the Workers' Party of Kurdistan, which is where part of at least the revolution is in Rojava is embedded in, started as an anti-colonial freedom movement in the region. And so to understand the KKK, which is the freedom movement that originated in Bakur, which is within colonial Turkey, one should again first understand this invisible colonial status of Kurdistan. Now, even during the Ottoman Empire, Ottoman reign, Kurdistan experienced violence, which reached a peak in the 19th century when the empire exterminated many Kurdish power-holding groups in its attempts to establish more centralized authority over previously autonomous territorial zones. But despite these violent attempts during the Ottoman Empire, Kurdistan enjoyed some limited autonomy in economic, political, and cultural matters, which was going to change dramatically with the imperial division of the Middle East in the early 20th century by England and France that redesigned the whole map of Middle East, colonizing much of it, with the exceptions of Turkey that gained sovereignty through the Lausanne Treaty of 1923, and Iran, which was able to resist British and Russian invasions of the time. So Kurdistan was made into an international colony through denial of an official status, and its management was left at the hands of the colonized or sovereign governments of Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran. And it's this international status and this lack of even a status of colony, right? Which sounds weird because we know colony is such a bad thing. But listen, in the case of Kurdistan, it was even denied this bare status of colony, which left Kurdistan unprotected even by the most bare laws that regulated the management of colonies. They were bare, they were obviously second-class, apartheid, violent ways of managing the colonized, but Kurdistan was denied even this. And this is therefore very ironic that it is this non-recognition, this imperial silence over Kurdistan that is continued to this day by certain, for example, even fragments of leftist and progressive movements that are saying, oh, you know, Kurdistan is dividing the Syrian regimes, like Syrian opposition's resistance and things like that, not recognizing that Kurds were colonized by Syria and Turkey. So it's this very historical, ironic sense that is being continued today. So if you think of it in this historical sense, the colonization of Kurdistan can be explained as a denial of the right to self-determination to a previously autonomous group of people residing in an historically acclaimed lands, and this denial of an official status that followed by structural and systematic violence that goes unrecognized internationally due to this lack of an official status of even that of a colony. And so we need to understand this, this position that in the 1920s onwards, that Kurdistan became unrecognized, silenced, unofficial colony of the colony. In the case of Syria and Iraq, and in the case of Turkey and Iran, it was the colony of these sovereign nation states. And as Kurdistan lost its political autonomy, its economy got under further risk of the colonizing central states, most of which already determined their economic policies according to the interests of the imperial powers. So that's why it's also a little bit ironic when someone looks at Iran or Iraq or, you know, Syria these days, they think of these places as somewhat in controversial terms with US imperialism. It is actually not the case in the sense that there are many, many global capitalist imperial economic ties that these regions have with the imperial core. So in that case, that Kurdistan, that the left of these particular countries didn't recognize the colonial status of Kurdistan, it is telling. So state discourses, and of course Kurds resisted, right? None of the colonized are ever just victims. We resist. We resist with the ways that we do. We resist with the ways that we can hand our hands on. We get criminalized, and this criminalization, this resistance and criminalization of resistance started as early as the 1930s. For example, in my hometown of Dersim alone, the Turkish state killed, massacred tens of thousands of people in 1938 to 1939, and people were forced to leave their homes, the remaining people, and to be assimilated into Turkish Sunni regions. My hometown of Dersim is also an Alevi region, so it's a religious and ethnic minority. And that the colonial forces, the colonizing Turkish state attacks it with even more intensity in that case. But this colonial violence was seen throughout Kurdistan during many episodes from the 1930s in Dersim to 1990s in Anfal, to Iranian regime's oppression of Kurds as we speak in this last 2 years with the Xinjiang Azizie Revolution. We have witnessed this. So we've seen resistance of Kurds increasing and never ceasing since that time on as well. And in 1984, there was an important and one of the largest anti-colonial movements that grew in the broader region of Kurdistan. That's the Workers' Party of Kurdistan that started in the 1970s. And it was critical of two things. It was critical of the Turkish left's denial, silence, complicity with Turkey's colonialism over this region. So the Turkish left never recognized the colonial problem, the racial problem. And it was also critical against the Kurdish nationalist components because the Workers' Party of Kurdistan believed in an anti-colonial socialist revolution that was to bring down capitalism and colonialism simultaneously. So it emerged again in the late 1970s and 1984, the Workers' Party of Kurdistan in the leadership of Abdullah Öcalan opened a guerrilla warfare against the Turkish state specifically. It was born in Bakur, the region of Kurdistan that's colonized by Turkey. And so this is where the Kurdish freedom movement with the PKK is where the Rojava Revolution aligns itself with the ideological leader of Abdullah Öcalan and the ideas of Öcalan that got evolved, that took different forms in the 1990s first and in the early 2000s next. So those two will be the last things I say. The first transformation, which was already there, was this greater increasing emphasis on a women's revolution and women's self-organizing. So Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the Workers' Party of Kurdistan, started writing about the patriarchal problem as early as the 1970s and 80s, though his ideas got evolved and got deeper, especially with the involvement of more women in the PKK, increasingly in the 1980s. So the first evolution in the PKK and the Kurdish freedom movement that's associated with the leader Abdullah Öcalan emerges in the 1990s. And one of the foundational steps that the party took, and it's, this is something that's very interesting for an anti-colonial movement because this doesn't have many examples in the region. So of course, women were always involved in anti-colonial movements, but their resistance to patriarchy itself was not brought to the core by the larger broader movement. So this is a change in the 1990s, and one of the most practical important decisions was in 1995, when the PKK, in its organizational conference, decided that there will be women's self-defense units within the guerrilla. So this was women only organizing. And this became a foundational step for a lot of anti-patriarchal politics and organizations that the party grows starting in the mid-1990s to later we'll see this in the Rojava Revolution. So women's leadership, an anti-patriarchal relationship, an anti-patriarchal freedom movement that sees women's emancipation as a pillar of its freedom movement is something that's very unique in that sense to the Workers' Party of Kurdistan, which got also adopted by the Rojava Revolution. And briefly, the second transformation, because my friends here, Azizie and Anya, will talk deeply into these elements, so I'll just introduce them. The second transformation in the PKK comes especially after the abduction and imprisonment of Abdullah Öcalan in 1999, where Öcalan moves away from this idea of self-determination in the form of a nation state Now, the notion of anti-colonialism and the notion of self-determination, I argue, continues to be critical, but the nation-state model is criticized in the sense that it cannot provide freedom for people and for societies. So in that sense, Öcalan criticizes the nation-state as a pillar of capitalist modernity. He writes extensively about the emergence of nation-state and capitalism and the working of capitalism and the nation-state together. So it's a critique of these systems. And he's written extensively on the inherently oppressive nature of the nation-state and its homogenizing and disempowering characteristics, and has denounced nation-state form of governance as, again, a pillar of capitalist modernity. And in addition to this critique of patriarchy and nation-state and colonialism and capitalism, the Kurdish freedom movement thinks, as Havin Güneşer, one of the important figures in the movement, says the question for freedom evolved. The question for freedom in the Kurdish freedom movement started on the basis of something very physical and identifiable: the oppression, colonization, and annihilation of Kurdish people. So that's how it starts, she says. But from there, it moved to a point where it became a quest for freedom in general and a questioning of the very meaning of life. And so what does a free life mean? So in that sense, the Kurdish freedom movement starts to move on to a broader notion of freedom that's critical of capitalism, capitalist modernity, nation state model, and colonialism, yet is in the search for a broader notion of freedom. And the good news is these aren't in the abstract, that these were, to the extent that they can be put under conditions of war and violence, they were put in practice in Rojava. Again, the extent of which we'll discuss today. And so this was just my background to where this revolution is situated, to the Kurdish freedom movement and the colonization of the Kurdish people. And now we'll hear much more deeper about Rojava Revolution itself. And I'll introduce the two wonderful speakers here. Azizie Aslan is from Kurdistan and lives in Mexico. She studied economics and obtained her master's degree in development economics in Istanbul, during which time she supported the organization of women's cooperatives. Since then, she has been working on issues related to women's economics and cooperativism in Kurdistan. She was awarded a PhD in sociology at the Institute of Social Sciences and Humanities, Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla, Mexico. She received a Jorge Alonso Chair Award in 2021 for the work described in this book that you see in front of you, Anticapitalist Economy in Rojava. And she's currently a research professor at Instituto Moro in Mexico. So, and then I'll introduce Anya as well, and then you can go in that order. Anna Rebrii is a New York-based researcher and journalist focusing on the Kurdish movement in Syria and Turkey and indigenous movements in Mexico. Her writing has appeared in The Nation, Jacobin, Truth Out, Open Democracy, and other outlets. She is a steering committee member of the Emergency Committee Formation. So, as you said, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aslan, for this great introduction. Make it very easy to introduce you the experience of the Rojava. So thank you for organization of this event, and thank you for coming to listen us. So I want to talk about you, especially about the Rojava experience, but I want to make a link between the idea of the autonomy, democratic autonomy for Kurdish struggle and in Rojava, and how the social economy work in this autonomy, and how there is some limits, there is some contradiction, there is some difficulty in this process. I want to introduce you this aspect. So, like Özlem mentioned, the Rojava is the part of the Kurdistan. But when I mentioned the Rojava, really, I mentioned all the projects they are doing in the north of and east of the Syria. I mean, the not for the Kurds and for all the people living there. And we are not talking about just a project now organized organized not just for the Kurds. I mean. So Rojava is the smallest part of the Kurdistan. Kurdistan is divided into 4 parts. I'm from the part of the Bakur, is the like Özlem is I mean the part of the Kurdistan colonized by the Turkey. I mean, and we people of Bakur, we use it refer to Rojava as Binghamton, is meaning below the border, where almost all the Kurds born on the border are part of the family in the another part of the border. Like my family divided by the border in the 2 parts. So I was born in the Azizie, very close to this border, and I lived there like 8 years. And then after that, we displaced our land, and we went to another part of the Turkey, and I grew up in the Antalya, Turkish city, on the very racist policies of the Turkey. And for me is I'm presenting a book coming from my PhD dissertation. But really, for me, to explain all our history is my history, but is also the history of the Kurdish people, but also is the history of the oppressed people by all the colonization policies in the world. For this, when we talk about the Rojava, for us, really, we are talking about how the history of the people in resistance and how the people create the new alternative system for their life and for humanity. So, for example, one day I remember when the Turkish government and Syria government had a good diplomatic relation, they opened the border one holiday day, and the border itself would turn into a place of the celebration for all the people, because family members who still did not know each other would introduce themselves. For example, I met with my cousins, and those I mean is that we gave some gifts and we embrace each other, and then after that, after finally of the day, in sunset the border would again became a wound, the fate of the Kurds. I mean, today that border is completely closed with the 911 kilometers of the wall. This wall is equipment with the surveillance system and high technology security system, like the wall between the Mexico and United States, or wall in between the different part of the Palestine and the Israel. But if you ever go to Rojava, someone will definitely take you to border, smile and say, soon we will bring down this wall. I mean, although in this part of the world, in the Middle East, maybe these words make us think that the people of the Rojava believe in a utopia. But I want to try to explain that isn't case of the Kurdish people. That is not utopian. They are doing a reality about to build a new life. Maybe someday can we bring this wall down? Yeah. So I worked on Rojava as a region where all the reflection and the organization transformation of the Kurdish movement Özlem mentioned, for the first time celebrating every day an integral practice that generate profound social transformation, emancipation, and autonomy as the self-determination of the people that I am defining as popular revolution. After the Syrian civil war that began in 2011, the Kurds declared autonomy for the first time in major Kurdish cities such as Kobane, Afrin, and Kamışlı in 2012. Like Kurds, we directly called this event like a Rojava Revolution, and always after this day, always we focus on the revolutionary process that was built after this night. But I want to talk about this night because it is actually very interesting. Remember how the revolution started this night. On the night of the July 19 of the 2011, people take over the wheat silos, grain silos. I mean, the people don't go to and take over the government building or police station. Actually, they had an arm also, but they went to silos, wheat silos, and take over all the wheat that the state had been stealing from them for years. We are saying the state stealing all the wheat from the people because many Kurds were denied Syrian citizenship in a 1962 census in Syria, and then their farmland was confiscated by the Syrian regime. I mean, it's the Assad regime. So, but they are also for them it was very it was forbidden to live, and state forced them to work in this classified farmlands for state. The state decided people what they planned, and then came and then took all the products and just leaves to people enough food not to die. Imagine the accumulation of the state by these like slave workers. This wheat, which is people took over in the revolution night, was enough for everyone during first 5 years of the revolution. I mean, if we are talking about the social economy of Rojava, we need to remember that from the very beginning of the revolution, a different kind of the economy was actually built. After that, they established the canton system in these cities, Afrin, Kobane, and Kamışlı, and throughout the Rojava, all the Rojava region, creating the autonomous government in 2014. And 2017, after assemblies and communes really worked like the way of the spontaneous way, they took the form of the autonomous region. I mean, the autonomy took the form of the autonomous region and the cantons, leading to the establishment of the Democratic Federation of the Northern Syria. And then after that, this federation start to work in the north of the Syria and the east of all the Euphrates River. So for just remember, just Özlem mentioned there is a system working with the democratic nation system, but this is democratic nation system was a theory about addressed by the Abdullah Öcalan. But when we are looking the Rojava really is working by the different part of the north of the Syria. For example, this process in the between the 2012 and 2015, there was a process of the liberation of some lands occupied by the Islamic State, like Raqqa, Tabqa, Deir ez-Zor. I mean, there is not Kurdish people, but Kurdish people fight for the liberation of this space. But liberation of this space, it was not like a just organized and controlled like the military way. In this time, the liberation brings to us a question how we can live now with Arabs before they colonize our lands. And for this democratic nation, before was a theory, it became to a practice of the heart of the autonomy of the Rojava and the north of the Syria. So, so I want to mention that there's all the assemblies and cooperatives. I want to talk how they are working. We need to always remember all the cooperatives, all the assemblies. There was Kurds, Arab, and Assyrian working together and doing together. And in this, all the institution of the autonomy, they have a coexistence of the different ethnic identity and the different ethnic religion identity. I mean. So especially I'm presenting now my book. The book is talking about the social economy, but when I start to investigate about social economy, Yahya is here, is the first person maybe we work together in Bakur about the perspective of the communal democratic economy, and we discuss with the Kurdish people in Bakur, and after that, this perspective start to apply in Rojava in a way like in Bakur, but also in the different way, because in Rojava there was a people assemblies sustained all this discussion about the economy and the organization of the cooperatives. So I need to talk to you about how is working assemblies, and this assemblies how to create the part of the economy. So there is in Rojava there is a lot of different kind of assemblies. For example, assemblies convene for election delegation system and the representation of the autonomous government. But all the process of the decision making in Rojava for the needs, for collective needs, now is they are doing with the form of the assemblies. I mean, there is a lot of assemblies. They're not delegation system. There is not representative system, but people come together and organize assemblies. They are not static assemblies. I mean, they organize these assemblies for their needs and for their discussions. So I am called this type of assemblies the dimension assemblies. So the dimension is we always talking about the democratic autonomy or democratic confederalism has a lot of dimensions. The dimension normally we say the 9th dimension, but there can be 14 dimension also for organized the life. For this, the dimension refer to fundamental needs for collective life, such as healthy culture, justice, economy, education, self-defense. This is, I mean, in state societies, these are public services provided by the state institution. But in Rojava, they are organized and produced from all communes, municipalities, cities, cantons, and regions by the people. People come together in an assembly and divide the goals to attend and produce their needs. They are talking about they always, when we say the needs, the needs is collective needs, it's not the individual needs, because we are not, we cannot come together and talk about what are our needs individual way. We need to talk what is our collective needs. So, for example, for organize this dimension, we need to firstly participate in common assemblies. And for example, my common assembly asking me to organize the economic needs of my community, my commune. But I cannot do alone. I need to coordinate my work with another people who also have a charge for their community to look for their economic needs. So I need to be together with the another people from the another communes and organize the economic assembly at the communities level. We call this communities level like a community. It's like a more than maybe 10 communes came together and they organize their community level and they look for their needs together. And then, for example, in the community level, we look for our needs, but maybe we need to organize with the cities, with the region, with the canton, and then we send some people to also participate in another assemblies. They are doing in the cities, they are doing in the canton, and they are doing the region of the autonomous administration. So this is the one way of how we coordinate all the people have a charge for economic needs. But also when we organize the economic assemblies, the community level or the canton level, after that we need to also organize another type of assemblies like a sector assembly. We're saying the agriculture assemblies, industry assemblies, commercial assemblies, or cooperative assemblies create the different sectors. This is the second way of how we can organize our assemblies in the economic dimension. And after that, for the coordinate all these assemblies, we need to also we need to know how to work them. And for this, we have a system of the inform between the different assemblies. So what I want to explain you all this kind of assemblies, because one dimension when organized create 100 of assemblies. And imagine 9 of the dimension of the democratic confederalism organize 1,000 and thousands of assemblies. I mean, is the people not just looking for the assembly representing? They doing every day a lot of assemblies and meetings, and they participate and discuss about their needs, their collective. I mean, today I am participating in the economic assembly, and I discuss about my economic needs, like a community. But after that, I am discussing also my self-defense, my justice, and my healthy and my education. All this process makes me a part of all the process of the decision of the autonomous administration. For this, a person in Rojava participate a lot of meetings, a lot of assemblies, and they decide their life, how they want to live, why they using some strategy, they decide and they doing and they produce some tool for produce their needs. So this is assembly. It's so important because, for example, in Rojava, one day people going to work in 9 o'clock of the morning, and they work after like until 2 or 3 afternoon. But then they go to the house, maybe they doing some personal things, they eating, they resting, but after 5, they just leave the day of home and they are going to some meeting, popular meeting, and they participate at some assembly. So, for example, I remember I participated a meeting with the movement, and movement discussed how people can work more, how people can be work long, but then people say no, we don't want to work long, because after 5 we have to go to assemblies, and for the make a politics we need the time. And the produce of the time of the politics is the most important part of the autonomy of the Rojava. And I mean, is the, for example, in here, people, you are now here, yeah, and maybe today you can come to listen us, but tomorrow maybe you are tired, you cannot do anything, another thing, because you are working like until 6 p.m. and after that you need the rest in the night. But for example, if we work like 2 or 3, and after that we can rest and we can go to make a politics. And the Rojava, this is working. I mean, in the Rojava, they are doing the economy to support how they produce to their time of the politics. And then for this, I want to say all of these assemblies in Russia are not like a part of the institution autonomy. It's like a movement. People mobilizing and people deciding about the daily life, and they produce the daily life. So for this, the self-determination is not just like a political. They produce their entire life, and they I mean for this is the struggle became to very identical to how we produce the life. So for this is about between the struggle and the activism, there is not separation, because the reproduction of the life is our struggle. It's not just go to the demonstration, go to the political meeting. We just, when we produce to our life, we just create a struggle. I mean, it's the Rojava struggle, Rojava Revolution is basis of this mobilizing the people for going to participate all in this assembly. So all of this assembly is also working for women. I mean, I didn't want to go to explain all this part. I think Anya maybe can talk about how women also organize their assemblies and their movement like assemblies. So I want to also now talking about all this Rojava Revolution can be I mean, the big challenge of the Rojava Revolution for me, and maybe for also Kurdish people and for Kurdish struggle, is how they can deepen and strengthen the empowerment, all of this autonomy. They need to also transcend the capitalism also, and all the domination of the capitalistic relation in our social spaces. For this, yeah, we're talking about the social economy. And social economy is a kind of economy like a non-capitalistic economy. We call this economy a different form. In Russia, they're using the social economy, but I prefer to always say the communal economy, because communal economy also has a very memory in Kurdistan, and make me sense the communal economy. What we're talking about, the part of the democratic autonomy is not like a new thing. We are not exporting a project. We just looking our ways, our communal life, how give a chance many years to be in resistance. I mean, the social economy just doing all the work to make a empowerment all this communal relation in Kurdistan. I don't know how many times I have more, but so the first Rojava Economic Conference was held in October 2015 with keywords: we communalize our land, water, and energy. Let's build the free and democratic life. We used it also in Bakur conference in Turkey. So in this conference, they decided to organize social economy based on the cooperatives, use values, collective work, and harmony with nature, based on the subjectivation of the women economy. Decision they made to establish cooperative houses to provide technical support to cooperatives and establish a union cooperatives and to put the communal lands to use of by society, by the cooperatives, and they can be under the control of the women economy and the general social economic committee. So first time I went to the Rojava in 2018, and in this time all this decision was taken place in Rojava. 1 million hectares of the land was communalized in Rojava. Cooperative houses were established in each city, and the women economic committees were organized. A cooperative for each commune meeting with all the communes and present the idea of the cooperatives to society. Also, in this time, several factories were open in the industrial field, working for the common benefits and needs, and their formation into the cooperative was discussed. So in the book, there is a part of I'm talking about this type of the factories, which one is working for the benefit of the society. So I'm calling to these factories without bosses, because really there is a 1 million of the hectare of the land communalized, but there's a lot of factories they don't have an owner. They don't have an owner. They are not. I mean, autonomous administration is not owner of these factories. People is not owner of these factories. They are very communal factories. They are working, people working there, and they produce their needs, but not their needs the level of the communities. They produce their needs level of all the region of the Rojava. So also they organize the merchants. The merchant class is the phenomenon of the Rojava, the economy of the Rojava. But they organize the people who make a trade and bring to some product which cannot produce in Rojava, but people need all these things. And the trade committee focus on preventing the black market in Rojava. From the first of the day of the Rojava Revolution, and really, for example, in Rojava, when the war it was very hard, there was enough black market in Rojava. So, yeah, okay. So there is a lot of cooperatives. They are organized the cooperatives. There is not a model of the cooperatives. They for this. I mean, in Rojava, people going there and they're saying that in Rojava there is not cooperatives, but movement talking about the cooperatives, because in social economy of the Rojava, they are not organized the cooperatives like an institution. They organize the working cooperatives. People come together, work in a communal field, communal lands, and then maybe they work 2 years. After that, they work another cooperatives and they make another cooperatives, or maybe they doing the cooperatives, but this cooperative is not working good, or people they not going to every time, and the people maybe there is some ethic problem about the cooperatives. Maybe, for example, they are not democratic cooperatives and they close the cooperatives. So I'm calling all this process of the cooperatives in Rojava cooperativization without the cooperatives, because there is not cooperatives, but people working together, and they collectivize their work forces, and they produce their life in cooperatives, like a mobile, and the cooperatives, not permanent cooperatives. I mean, they make a cooperatives and they work and they destroy and they remake. This process of the make, destroy, and remaking is the model of the now, is the model of the cooperatives in Rojava. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Azizie. I mean, Azizie really, that, you know, we in the US especially talk about evolution a lot, like anti-colonialism, so anti-capitalism, anti-racism. So it's like, you know, sometimes to actually look into how does this work in practice? Like, what do we put in place of this, and how do we really live on a day-to-day basis in this anti-systemic space, and how do we care for one another, from health to justice to economy to, you know, education. So it is therefore a lot to think about, and we are thankful for that glimpse that this is possible. That's hopeful. Thank you, and Anya, the floor is yours now.
Thanks so much for coming. I want to start my talk tonight by introducing you to one of the most important Kurdish women leaders whom I met last year when I visited Syria at a 3-day long women's conference in Tunisia, one of the cities on the Turkish border. Her name is Jiyan Belkidan, and she's celebrated as one of the pioneer women activists who joined the struggle very early on, determined to get women out of their homes, where the Kurdish society, but also broadly Middle Eastern society, has confined them traditionally. And so Jiyan and her colleagues, they would go from house to house, sometimes spending hours, sometimes spending days, talking to Kurdish families, trying to convince them to let their daughters join the public sphere, join the revolution, to pursue life choices other than marriage, which is the traditional case for women in that region. And these women later became the core of the YPJ, right? The famous women-only force that was central to defeating ISIS. And as I was told, the territorial defeat of ISIS in 2019 was only possible because these women took up arms and fought. And they fought not just to defend their homeland, they fought to also defend their rights and freedoms as women. That conference where I saw her speak, where I saw Jiyan Belkidan speak last year, was her last public appearance. On the way back from the event, her car was parked by Turkish drone. And I happened to pass that night a burning car on a major highway just outside the city of Kamishli. And I was wondering what had happened, why the car was on fire. And only later I found out that Jiyan, two of her colleagues, they were involved in the fire. They were one, Jiyan was one of the many women leaders of Northeast Syria who fell victim to Turkish drone war. And so this is the reality that I witnessed during my 2 trips to the region over the last couple of years. On one hand, a very inspiring commitment to building a more just and democratic and more inclusive society. But on the other hand, the unceasing war by the Turkish state that strives to annihilate this revolution. What is it that the Turkish state feels so threatened by? Why are they doing this? And yes, there is this long-standing hostility towards the Kurds that Turkey has colonized. This has been explained. There are also neo-Ottoman geopolitical aspirations of Turkey. But I think undoubtedly Turkey also feels threatened by this very progressive model of governance that is so antithetical to, in so many ways, antithetical to how the Turkish state operates. And so let's say, let's look how the autonomous administration, what we've noticed here, what they have achieved in terms of gender rights. Just one example, right? The women-only fighting force, and the center to defeat ISIS is just one element of the much broader program for women's liberation pursued by the movement. Now, these days, if you go to any institution of Northwest Syria, the commune, right, the building block of the new political system, the Ministry of Economy, the university, will be greeted by two co-chairs, one woman, one man. And that applies to every position of authority. Now, every institution of the autonomous administration has an autonomous women's council that gives the members of that institution veto power over any decisions taken by that institution if it may negatively affect their lives. And in order to make sure that women are equally represented across all the institutions, they have a quota. They have a women's quota that has recently been raised from 40% to 50%. And just imagine if we had these safeguards here in the United States, would we be seeing such a successful backlash against abortion rights? Maybe not. And perhaps, like, even the most inspiring part about this process of liberating women is the fact that it has spread beyond the Kurdish communities from which these ideas and practices initially emerged. It's not just Kurdish women, right, who were liberating themselves. I visited Raqqa, which is the former capital of the Islamic State, also in northwest Syria last year, and I met with some Arab women who are running a women-only umbrella organization called Zanubia that operates across Arab majority areas, the ones that I didn't mention that were liberated and later added to the autonomous administration. And you probably know this, but under the ISIS rule just a few years ago, really, women and girls were traded on the streets of that city as sex slaves. But even before that very brutal, exceptionally brutal ISIS rule, women's lives was not really. It's a traditional patriarchal society. One of the Zanubian members told me that she was married off by her family before she even finished primary school, and that's like a good case scenario, right? Many girls are not even sent to school at all. And again, it's a very common life story in that society. And then when Raqqa was liberated in 2018 by the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is like a military structure that brought together different ethno-religious groups that inhabit this region, like Kurds, Arabs, Syrians, Syrians, Armenians. When Raqqa was liberated in 2018, these women, to my talk last year, they thought to themselves, Kurdish women are organizing themselves up north, in the northern part of the country. Why can't we, as Arab women, do this thing here? And so they did. They formed Zanubia and they embraced this model that was developed by the Kurdish women's movement, of course, modifying it to their specific cultural, regional traditions. And the Arab women are not the only ones, outside the Kurdish society who have seen this revolution and taken advantage of it as an opportunity for themselves to organize themselves. I talked to Armenian women, I talked to Syriac women, and all of them are organizing themselves. It's really a flourishing of self-organization, especially in terms of women. And I think this pluralistic nature of this revolution is something that's so subversive, not just to the ethno-nationalist, authoritarian Turkish and Syrian states that vie for control of this region, but overall to the regional and global status quo. It shows that different ethno-religious groups can work together. Different groups that have been pitted against each other by imperialist powers, by ethno-nationalist regimes, as is very much the case in the Middle East, They can overcome long-standing, deep-rooted resentment and prejudice, and they can start working on an alternative model of organizing society that's not a nation state, but a model that gives equal access to power to all ethno-religious groups and gives them the right to local autonomy and self-defense. And around 50 years ago, the Syrian Baath government confiscated land of thousands of Kurds, forcibly resettled them, and I'm talking about the northeastern part of Syria, and replaced them with thousands of Arabs from other parts of the country. They created the so-called Arab belt in order to break up the homogeneity of this marginalized and thus potentially rested region. And yet, I mean, you can imagine what kind of feelings that resulted in among the local population. And yet, over a decade, in that same region, Arabs and Kurds have been working together despite this resentment and prejudice that was largely produced because of this policy, because of the policies of this type of the Syrian government. And in fact, Arabs, many of whom were marginalized and repressed by the Syrian government before the civil war, they also see the autonomous administration as really the only possible solution to the ongoing crisis, ongoing violence in Syria. And it's a bulwark against the return of the criminal Assad regime. And they now constitute the majority of the Syrian democratic forces, right, the military wing of the autonomous administration, and the principle of proportional representation ensures that the Arab majority regions are largely run by Arabs. So it's a win-win situation for everyone, right? And the same applies to other groups that inhabit the region. And this is it's a very precious experiment, right, in so many ways, that has managed to survive under the worst possible circumstances. I mean, if you want to start a revolution, that's not the place that you would choose, right? And now Turkey is trying to annihilate it. And we don't see this much in the news these days, but since 2019, when Turkey invaded and occupied parts of northern Syria for the second time, it has led an unceasing war on the region through a variety of means, right? They've been cutting the downstream river flow of Euphrates, depriving millions of people of access to water. They have placed an economic embargo in the region, which makes it very difficult to even import basic needs like sugar and flour. They have been bombarding frontline areas, forcing people to abandon their homes out of fear for their lives. They have been carrying out these regular drone assassinations of people like Jian. And more recently, they carried out a massive aerial bombardment campaign that lasted 5 days and that wiped out almost half of the region's oil, power, and water infrastructure. And I'm sure you didn't see that in the news. Yeah. Yeah, Turkey got away with this criminal act in violation of international law, human rights, etc., etc. And it's not a surprise. Turkey has been given carte blanche to wage war on this region since 2019. And one of the SDF women commanders, one of Jian's former colleagues with whom I talked to, she told me this is not just Turkey's war. This is a war led by international powers that fight for control of this region. And indeed, Turkey's attacks are not possible without the United States' implicit or explicit permission. And in fact, this latest military operation, this criminal military campaign, it did not even discourage the Biden administration from pursuing a $20 billion sale of fighter jets to its NATO ally Turkey to reward it for allowing Sweden to access NATO. So for the United States, Turkey, has been an ally that can do nothing wrong. Everything is allowed. And so, yes, there are so many ways, so many things we can learn from the Rojava Revolution, right? That's the title of this panel, but it's also imperative that we do what we can to ensure the survival of this project. Right? If we want to see it thrive, we need to do what we can as constituents, as people whom the US government purports to represent, to do what we can to stop the United States complicity in this ongoing war, Turkish war on Syria. And if I may, I would encourage people to sign on our sign-up sheet in the back, and there are a few copies of Azizie's books that people should buy, and we have some free materials also explaining the work that we do at the Emergency School. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. So I guess I'll just open the floor for questions. If that's okay, John? Okay, we have time. Right. Yes, please.
In the cooperatives, what is the pay structure usually like? And what is the extent of like democratic decision making?
Turkish, okay. Doing this speech to colonial landscape, which bears its weight, a little bit for me to switch.
Yeah, I mean, you understand it, but English also is very limited, and for this I maybe need to
I'll
some
do
of
better.
the
I'll do better translation.
translation, but Okay. Yani kooperatiflerdeki yapı şöyle oluşturuluyor. Önceki kooperatif yapılması için komüne başvuruda bulunuluyor.
So the structure of the cooperatives is that you have to apply to the commune first with your idea of the cooperative.
Ekonomi komitesi komüne ihtiyaçlarınızı tartışıp ihtiyaçlarını tartışırken kooperatifleşebiliyor musunuz diye bir öneri oluşturuyor.
So the economics committee tells the group of people that discuss your needs first. I mean, because as I mentioned, that need-based structuring is very important for the cooperatives. So to tell the community to assess your needs and also assess your capability of whether you're able to sustain a cooperative.
Sonrasında eğer komün öneri oluşturursa ondan sonra kooperatifler evine gidiliyor.
And if the commune decides, to move ahead with this, they have the needs and they have the capacity for this, and they go to the
Kooperatifleri de yani bu
the house, the larger, broader mechanism for all the cooperatives. Cooperatives.
Kooperatif evi eğer yani kooperatif evi de bu kooperatifler kurabileceklerine dair onlara böyle teknik destek veriyor ve ekonomik destek gerekiyorsa onu buluyor. Mesela tarla desteği, mazot desteği ya da işte para desteği gerekiyorsa onu ekonomik koordinasyonun farklı mekanizmalarında edinebiliyor.
And so the house of the larger body of cooperatives, house of cooperatives is what they're called, discusses with them whether they have any structural needs, technical needs, economic needs that could be sustained by the broader region. So because as you were saying in your talk earlier, that different places, different cooperatives, different communes can sustain, can provide different things for a newly building cooperative.
Genellikle kooperatifler birliği finansal destek gerçekleştiriyor. Örneğin ya da tarım komitesi mazot ve eğer bir tarım kooperatifi ise tarla veriyor.
Okay, so the body, larger house of cooperatives gives them usually the financial means, and then if it's an agricultural cooperative, then the house of agricultural cooperatives will give them the land and other means to, like oil and whatever you need to basically use this land.
Tüm yani normalde komündeki herkes aslında kooperatifin üyesi haline geliyor eğer komünün kooperatifiyse.
So if that cooperative belongs to the commune, then everyone in that commune then becomes a member of the cooperative.
Aha. Ama yine komün mesela orada kimin çalışacağını komün içerisinden kendisi seçiyor.
And the commune collectively decides on who will be working in that cooperative.
Bazı mesela bazı kooperatifler kuruluyor sonra kimse çalışmak istemiyor. Öyle sorunlar var tabii.
And sometimes there are problems like, the commune first decides to form a cooperative, but then there are not enough volunteers to work at that particular cooperative to meet the needs of the commune. So there are sometimes issues.
Ama yani normalde yani bence Sociology kooperatifleri farklı kılan en önemli şeylerden bir tanesi, karakteristik özelliklerinden bir tanesi. Kooperatif meclisi ne? Komündeki herkes katılıyor. Orada çalışanlar, yani normalde orada çalışanlar yapıyor kooperatif meclisini. Ama üyesi olduğu için, yani komündekiler doğal üyesi olduğu için, onlar bütün meclis toplantılarına katılabiliyorlar.
According to one of the major characteristics that separates the cooperatives in Rojava from other cooperative models is that it's not only the workers in the cooperatives who meet the cooperative decision-making process who can attend and participate in the cooperative decision process, but it's also the members of the commune at large, because the cooperative was initially formed to meet the needs of the commune, and everyone therefore becomes a member of the cooperative as well.
Yani kooperatif aslında toplumsal ihtiyaçtan başlayıp onu ürettiğinde ve zaten yani komündeki üyeler bunun esas üyeleri olduğunda, yani komündeki herkes onun esas olduğunda aslında hani doğalında aslında demokratik bir zeminde kurulmuş.
Because even from the start, because it's basically decided to be formed by the interests and the needs of the commune, then its initial founding to its decision mechanisms later on, that it is actually the process itself who leads itself to this democratic decision making that is at the level of the commune at large.
Ama yani mesela işte orada yine sözcüler, sözcüler sistemi var, işte bütün işleri koordine edenler var ve yani farklı zamanlarda eğer gerekiyorsa mesela rotasyon sistemi var. Bunların hepsi aslında mecliste tartışılıp yani demokratik bir zeminde çözülmeye çalışılıyor.
But of course, every cooperative still has like the co-chair system that Anya mentioned. And at the same time, these are on a rotating basis, and there's also democratic decision making around who will work and how the work in the cooperative will be distributed, and that there's taking turns, to make it the decision making and the working and the functions of the cooperative as democratic as it can get.
Yani diğer kooperatifler gibi yani şeyleri de yani sandıkları var. Mesela bir kısmı işte yapılıyorsa yani ürettiklerini genellikle satmıyorlar. Yani genellikle komünün olduğu için. Ama eğer satmaları gereken bir şey varsa ve ondan gelir elde ettilerse komüne, kooperatifler evine ve kooperatifler birliğine diye 3 parçaya ayırıyorlar.
So usually the cooperative is founded to meet the needs of the people. So what they produce is usually kept for the commune. But in case there's any surplus, then it's decided like which stays with the commune and which goes to the larger cooperative houses
and the cooperative union.
and the cooperative.
Thank you. I also meant actually like the pay. How is the pay decided? And is it equal or not?
They decided also in the commune. I mean, is that there is some salary limits in the autonomous administration for the some work, but for cooperatives they discussed in the assembly and they decide how they can pay the people.
I had a question about
participation. Because I imagine that people spend a lot of hours talking in the assembly, right? And I also imagine that the attendance is high enough for the system to continue working. And it's just such a wonderful thing. And I'm wondering, how did you actually manage to bring people together and make them stay, right? Because, well, in some Western countries, they're trying to also introduce like elements of the system. I think in Belgium, they had like assemblers, but they compensated people for participation. And in other cases, when they didn't pay people, they just dropped out and didn't attend. But like, how did you manage to do this? It doesn't fall apart.
I think for understand this, you need to understand why we are Kurdish people. I mean, the Kurdish people, they are very participate people with the political life. And for assemblies, for example, people of the Rojava, they participate to assembly. They enjoy the participate to assembly, because before this assemblies or autonomous administration, they denial, and in every life of the politics and the social life and the economic lives. And for this, now they have a place and they can participate and they can discuss it. They enjoy it about this. And people, is the people, for example, they discuss with the Kurdish movement, make more time for the politics. And maybe the space of the politics space is assemblies or cooperatives. They have a system of criticize and auto-criticize, and people participate there. And the democratic way, then they develop a democratic way to be a space, and people just participate. Is that we don't have I don't remember any time, neither in Bakur and neither in Rojava, we don't have a problem for participate for decide our life.
I think maybe if I may, maybe part of it is also because of what you said initially, like how it's not just that, right? It's not just the cooperative, it's not just like bringing a different system or something, but it is a broader, like it comes with a larger like political education. Like you don't go to just regular like the schooling here, right? It's like the system of evolution of everything, because one of them doesn't really work. If you go to like a school that has like capitalist competitive mentality and individualism, right? Like from there, it's harder to then transition to now I want to participate in something. And that belief in you can actually create life. Though I bet there's still like at times, especially because of the ongoing violence that Anya mentioned, that people want to do this, but then it constantly is being attacked. We had talked about like how it creates some motivation issues at times. But really, I think the key is also like right from kindergarten to genealogy institutes, like there's universities that's organized in a matter of like, how do we think about patriarchy? How do we think about women? Like, how do we think of like creating a different system? Like what is, so there's a lot of questioning and figuring out of what life is and what free life can be at various levels of being and existing. And that's, I think, is more motivating than like here, right? Everything stays the same and you introduce something, or like keep the capitalist racial colonial system and then make women as leaders. Like that doesn't work. Like what's that? What good that does that, right? Like because patriarchy is obviously enmeshed with colonialism and racism. So to just make women leaders, right? Like wouldn't be very meaningful to the life of the majority in that sense. So maybe it's also from that anti-systemic foundation of the revolutionary project itself that is more sustainable.
Good question. I'm just curious about within the assembly cooperative system, how is there like a mechanism for conflict management or conflict resolution or access to justice, even within, you know, yeah, I'm gonna think it's communal, but there are conflicts that exist within any kind of process. So what does that look like? What is the judicial system look like?
We have another guest here who's also like spoken to us previously about part of the justice system in and Clara,
Yeah, do you want me to answer that?
would you like to answer that actually, because you know we can make this communal, right? It's a communal learning experience. And especially because you looked at conflict and right, especially with gender issues and the regimes, I think it would be very valuable.
Yeah,
So I agree with you.
yeah, of course, you.
Okay. Fine.
But,
No, but she gave the floor to me, so I gave it.
My name is Claire. I spent 2 years living in Rojava. And for a lot of that time, I was with the women's justice system, called the Women's House, which is a good microcosm to answer your question, which is broadly the justice system in Rojava is based on mediation and reconciliation as a first step. So every commune has a social reconciliation committee, they call it. And if you have a dispute within your community, you're supposed to go to them first. To say it's a trade dispute, right? Like you went into a contract with somebody, you know, you're doing private business, say it's not cooperative. You went into a contract with somebody in your community, you were trying to do something and they didn't pay you or something. Ideally, you go to your social reconciliation council. And they try to work it out at that level without going to the courts, without having to get sort of any higher level law involved. If you can't, then there's a municipal social reconciliation committee. It goes through multiple levels of the council system before, if you really can't come to an agreement when you talk it out, it goes to the court, because there are still laws and there are still courts in Rojava. But the basis of the system for many levels until you get to the courts and law includes these mediation councils that are different. So, and there's different houses for different types of issues. So for domestic violence or domestic issues, there's the women's house, which they're thinking of changing the name to the family house because there's lots of issues for everyone. For trade disputes, there's the trade house. And for criminal issues, things such as rapes or murders, those tend to go straight to the court. And there are specific laws that the revolution has rewritten those things, so there's no death penalty in Rojava anymore. And I believe, although these are in the spirit of the revolution, these things are constantly being reiterated and rewritten, right? And that's the whole idea, that you're responsive to the moment, to what the community needs. But I believe currently the maximum jail time is 20 years for murder and rape. Which the revolution hasn't been long enough for anybody to be in jail. Not long, right? So we'll see what happens. So that's and then within the court system, you have, it's you know, it's slightly different than the normal court system that we're used to. There tends to be 3 judges on each case, one of which generally, hopefully speaking, is a woman. And I, at that time, going to court with the domestic violence cases that we couldn't come to, or the divorce cases that we couldn't come to an agreement with in the women's house. And my experience at the court is that it was just another mediation session.
With 3
With 3 judges, yes. And so for the women's house, for example, the representative of the mediation center, the representative of the women's house who had been following the case, because let's say you come in once and you can't come to an agreement, maybe you come in again and again. And generally speaking, people would come in 4 or 5 times before they were like, all right, we need to go to the court. Right, so there's time and space built into the system to make sure that everybody feels heard, that it's a sustainable decision that you come to. But if you really can't, then you go to the court, and the representative from the women's house who was following that case would accompany them to the court to present the situation to the judges. And they generally would take her advice on what to do. So it's sort of built into the system that these mediation houses or councils have the most power, that they are considered the situation. So you know, but then there's also the law. So there's, for big things like, you know, domestic violence and rape and like all of these, you know, drugs, different, reconciliation things, new laws have been written in the context of the revolution, in the context of the councils, the assemblies, people coming together, rewriting it, thinking about what this community really needs. But for a lot of other things that you need to sort of run like a society, you know, which, the Syrian regime laws are still on the books. For like little things. And so that creates, especially in a city like Kamishlo, which is actually still sort of not half, but has occupation of the Syrian regime within the city. It creates this interesting dual system in places. And the Syrian regime, so people can just go maybe to the Syrian regime courts. It's like one building in this trade dispute is like in the Syrian regime occupied area, right? And they have, so there's this interesting dual power, but what that does is that we've, especially when it comes to women's rights, we've seen a lot of movement on the Syrian regime side having to be in response to what's happening in the autonomous administration controlled territory. Because they've had to, you know, people are like, well, I'll just go to the autonomous administration court, right? I'm gonna, essentially, they have to be more progressive because the autonomous administration is undermining their moral authority by being better, like a better option for people. And so that dialectic is really interesting. And it's also in the areas like the Syrian regime, now, for example, women have a right to their children, I believe, in the Syrian regime, in a divorce case, which wasn't the case before. That's an innovation that the autonomous administration brought underneath their new domestic law. And so you're seeing, even if it's not being acknowledged, even if they will politically pretend like it's their own homegrown thing, you know, and even if nobody's paying attention, there are real effects that the autonomous administration system is having on the region around it. But yeah, that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm still curious about how laws, you know, how I guess how jointly what is the legislative body looks like on a cooperative model that's so radical and from like neat days from these various organizations and smaller group and how did they dissolve themselves and they dissolve and create and regenerate based on needs and who determines that they need to dissolve, all of that is fascinating.
Right, I mean, I guess the idea is that most of it is decided at the, the commune level. And mediation and all that, but again, it is, and I remember, I mean, both of you say that needs and constant change. And that's kind of like what revolution is about, is the spread, right? As you say, it's like not stagnant, it's ongoing.
Yeah, autonomy is not like we have a model and we apply this model and we stay in this model. It's not like this. Autonomy is the change every day. And because people discussing what they have done, and then after that maybe they don't like it and they try another thing, and this maybe it's not useful for people and they doing another thing. For example, all the experience of the Malajan, the women houses, is not coming from the idea of it's not theoretical ideas. People just women start when they open the women houses, like there was a social thing. But after that, women came to there and they told about their problem, like a couple problem, like a family problem. They have a problem, domestic problem in society. And then, okay, women movement say we need to attend all of these problems because people coming and telling us, and women coming and telling us. And they start to work with women. But after that, men start to come to Malaysia and talk about also their domestic problems. Which, in this sense, for example, today in Rojava, people say the domestic problem is not in the population not organized in houses. the domestic problem is a social problem, and we need to resolve also a social space. And for these, for example, women houses is not social. They are not. They are not doing for example, they are painting there. They take the education also in Malaysia, but also they try to resolve their problems. And now, for example, there is also people houses, and they are attempted, for example, land problems there, security problems there, and what are our problem for reorganize our life? They attempt the social spaces, because all for example, the patriarchy we understand is not like a relation between the men and women. Also between the women, we have a patriarchal problems, and between the men also there is we need to change all the subjectivity of the society. For this, we are working like a patriarchy, like a domination system for all the society. Or for example, I don't know. For example, there are the land committee. It's not like with the law. It's not with they are not working with the police. They are not working with the YPG or YPG. You know, is the army forces. It is very social committee, and the people coming there and they say, okay, I need the land, but I don't have, and how you can give me a land? And they need to, for example, find a person, he has a maybe land, and they make this relation and how they can share their lands, and how can we create a collective land. I mean, the depend of what is the problem and how community attend to this problem and how they discuss it. There is not always make a same solution. Is also solution is so different, and this solution is also changing in the time.
I would just say if it feels confusing, if it is, because there's so exactly what you said, like there's just so many different iterations of it in different places. It's also confusing because you want it, right? Like there's a constant negotiation about, okay, you know, that's that process of communal decision making. So yeah, it's a true experiment, you know, and there's not just one model of cooperative decision making or cooperative justice in Rojava. There's a lot, which is it's very complicated. I'm so impressed. I managed to. I can't wait to read it. So
and also I think it's the good things of the Rojava. For example, if we're thinking about all the problems or all the discussion, you need to remember there is not state.
Yeah.
I mean, if there is not state, you have to resolve your problem with the community. But for example, all the question about the participate, how people participate, because if, for example, in this country or this city, if you not participate some decision of the political decision, but state make a decision, and they just impose our life. But there is not state, and they have to resolve their problem and have to discuss their problem. There is not another institution make for you decision. This is a great thing. I mean, for life.
I mean, one of the things that Öcalan said, which I think is very important in this context, is that you know, the capitalist modernity and the nation state weakens society. So society becomes incapable. Like we lose our potential, our abilities of doing these things. So then it becomes interesting to see that, oh, we can do these things. Like obviously it's not like a utopian perfect model, there would be problems. And that's why though like still there is a lot, and also I think what would you think of like also there's a lot of self-reflection that's part of the broader Kurdish freedom movement. It's like you need to reflect. If you do something, you go back and reflect on it, you see if it works, if it benefits society, community. And if not, there's a self-critique, you know, these mechanisms also that people, I mean, political, psychological mechanisms in place for reflection. And that's also like ongoing revolution, I think.
Actually, for this, my book is has a critical way to look the Rojava experience, but not my way of point. I'm trying to how people criticize their action.
Right.
There is a lot of interview with the people from the Kurdish movement and the autonomous administration and part of the cooperatives and assemblies. They auto criticize their activities. And for this, I think in Kurdish movement, it's so common to look our action with the critical way, but not for us, for example, the criticize is not like for to say, okay, we eliminate, we just stop it, we abandon it, this idea. Not for this, we criticize to make better, to make the sense for our life. For this, for example, when we start to discuss the perspective of the communal economy, it was so different what is we are doing now. But it's not just about how we experience, also how we criticize our experience. I mean,